So we did not do a countdown. That's my mistake, Evelyn. So we're welcoming everyone because we are live. I like the countdown. The countdown is one of my favorite things about it. So welcome, everyone. We're so glad that you're joining us tonight. My name is Roy.Fernandes. I'm the Superintendent of Indigenous Education and Equity with Toronto Catholic. My pronouns are he, him. I'll introduce my partner for tonight.
Hi, everyone. My name is Evelyn Paris. My pronouns are she, her, and I am an equity resource teacher with the Toronto Catholic District School Board. Happy to be here with you this evening and with Roy to have this important, meaningful, and timely conversation.
Yeah, and we so appreciate you joining us wherever you are. One of the beauties of live stream, if you're sitting there making your dinner right now or eating your dinner or whatever else that you're doing, you're just welcome to kind of just sit and listen tonight. And we'll talk about some of the ways that things are going to unfold. You can see that there's a banner that's been put up across the bottom there, questions or comments. We're going to be really respectful and diligent with time tonight. And so we're hoping we'll get to the question period, maybe around 7:15-ish. By 7:25, we'll start doing a wrap up. We are recording tonight, so we know some of you may be watching this live right now. Some of you might be watching after the fact. Let's start just talking about the whole idea, even the title for tonight, Words Matter. This is something we know in our schools. They matter tremendously. And one of the questions I know we had someone ask as well as tonight, just focusing on 2S LGBTQ plus inclusion. And no, it's words matter appropriate for every group that we have within Toronto Catholic. But we also understand going into the month of June with Pride Month that we do sometimes have, I'm going to say, some more difficult conversations, difficult choice of words that people use at times that aren't acceptable. And we're going to talk about that as we go through. I want to read you a quote that was from the Globe and Mail this past weekend. And it was an article in the Weekend Globe, What My Trans Brothers Coming Out Taught Me About Being a Better Ally. And it's Rachel Brown was the author. I'm still learning, but my experience with my brother has taught me a few key things about how to be a good ally. Interrogate your own biases. Don't be afraid to say you don't know something. If you mess up, apologize quickly and make a sincere effort not to repeat your mistakes. And above all, listen and stay open-minded. Pushing ourselves to be curious and kind can only make our relationships and our communities better. So appreciate that last line. That's what this is always going to be about, finding ways to treat people with kindness, or treat people with respect within our Catholic school system. We are part of Toronto Catholic. And that's going to kind of be one of those guiding mantras, I guess we'll say, that you're going to see kind of weaves through everything we're talking about tonight. Showing kindness, showing respect to those that are around us. I'm going to turn it over to Evelyn, I think, to start us off in prayer, as we always do in our Catholic schools.
So I invite everyone to take a moment now and center ourselves in our faith. And we begin by signing ourselves in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty God, through your Holy Spirit, you created unity in the midst of diversity. We acknowledge that human diversity is an expression of your manifold love for your creation. We confess that in our brokenness as human beings, we turn diversity into a source of alienation, injustice, oppression, and wounding. Empower us to recognize and celebrate differences as your great gift to the human family. Enable us to be the architects of understanding, of respect and love. Through the Lord, the ground of all unity, we pray. All saints, pray for us.
For us.
In the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
And just before I lead us into our land acknowledgement, just a beautiful prayer that Evelyn had. Really like that one line. Well, there's so many lines in it that I appreciated. Again, if we're going to keep talking about words mattering, all of us, the architects of understanding, of respect and love, that does put that onus on us. It's not just about your child's teacher. It's not just about your child's principal, your supervisor, whoever it might be. All of us are the architects of this work. And it's contingent on all of us to keep holding ourselves accountable to using words that empower, words that affirm, words that lift up. We talk about this in schools all the time because it's so easy to use words in other ways. And again, we'll keep referring to as we go through. As Evelyn takes us to our next slide with our land acknowledgement, we really believe that when this land acknowledgement comes up again, when words matter, to really consider that this land that we walk on, it does belong to the Creator. We don't own this earth. We're a part of it. And we need to take care of it. That's what the Dish with One Spoon covenant asks us to do. To really only take what we need, to leave some for others, to keep it clean. All those are ways that we're going to keep this earth going into the future. We acknowledge that all Toronto Catholic District School Board property is situated on traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat people. We understand that the land covered by Treaty 13 is held by the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. And we also listen to the echoes of their prayers to the Creator. We respect the beauty of Mother Earth, and we strive to learn and draw wisdom from First Nation, Inuit, and Métis traditions. When we talk about two-eyed way of seeing, Indigenous people often tell us, look, there are ways that Indigenous people have lived for years that matter and that can help move us forward. But Indigenous people also say we understand some Western ways that equally matter. Two-eyed way of seeing, what we encourage everyone tonight is find how can we learn? We hope you take something from tonight, some maybe new piece of information, some new consideration, some aha moment that maybe we hadn't considered before. I'm going to put it back to Evelyn for our next part of something that just hopefully grounds us in the understanding how important the role all of us play in the day-to-day conversation is.
So this is a passage that has really spoken to me deeply from a book called Embers. One Ojibwe's Meditations by Richard Wagamese, and a colleague and friend of mine, a member of our team, Sonia Charal, shared this book with me. And so when I read this, it really made the land acknowledgement and the work that we're doing in equity really come together for me in a very personal way. So I'm sharing this with you today, and to help us kind of listen to the voices of our Indigenous elders. So Richard Wagamese says in Embers, I've been considering the phrase all my relations for some time now. It's hugely important. It's our saving grace in the end. It points to the truth that we are all related, that we are all connected, that we all belong to each other. The most important word is all. Not just those who look like me, sing like me, dance like me, speak like me, pray like me, or behave like me. All my relations. That means every person, just as it means every rock, mineral, blade of grass, and creature. We live because everything else does. If we were to choose collectively to live that teaching, the energy of our change of consciousness would heal each of us and heal the planet. Anyway, isn't it beautiful? It's such a beautiful sentiment and way of living into the world, way of living and being in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to start you off with, I think, you're going to talk about our 4 agreements of courageous conversations.
So we use these 4 agreements. There's this kind of an invitation for us in the work that we do, in the spaces we go into. We have courageous conversations because we talk about things. We talk about things such as race, homophobia, transphobia, colonization, things that we weren't raised growing up talking about. And so when we engage in conversations that can be challenging, can maybe push us a little bit out of our comfort zone, we like to start by inviting all of us to do these simple 4 things. And the first one is to stay engaged. Staying engaged means remaining morally, emotionally, intellectually, and socially involved in the dialogue. The second one is experience discomfort. This norm acknowledges that discomfort is inevitable, especially in dialogue about race, and that participants make a commitment to bring issues into the open. The third invitation is that we agree to speak our truth. Now, Roy and I are the ones doing the speaking today, but we make a commitment to say that this means being open about thoughts and feelings and not just saying what you think others want to hear. Sometimes we have to say the things that may make us uncomfortable, but it needs to be said. And so when we speak our truth, we're speaking our own lived experiences. And so you invite others to do the same when you're having conversations, IRL, so to speak. And then the fourth one is that we expect and accept non-closure. This agreement asks participants to hang out in uncertainty and not rush to quick solutions, especially in relation to racial understanding, which requires ongoing dialogue. We don't pretend that we're going to be solving the problems of discriminatory language, hurtful language, the use of hurtful language this evening, but we are committed to creating more spaces like this one and more spaces to engage in these conversations, because dialogue is where the magic happens. Dialogue is where the power is in making a better place, a better world, a kinder, more empathetic world and school and for everyone, for our children and for ourselves, really. So this is the invitation for us all to kind of take on this mindset, this philosophy, this sense of how to engage in this conversation.
This is how Evelyn and I will start going off time, because we said we're going to stick to a script, but I got to piggyback off this, Evelyn. I so appreciate that line around expecting and accepting non-closure. I'm someone that wants to see everything's going to be solved by the end of this hour. But Evelyn so aptly says that, right? No, it's not. This is the start of the conversation. And when we hear about the dialogue being magic, we encourage that dialogue. I'm going to mention again, just a few times throughout the night, some of you did pre-submit questions, and we're going to try and get to those. But again, this URL at the bottom there, please submit questions there. And we'll do our very best to kind of respond to those as we go through tonight. We're saving that hopefully towards the end. What we don't get to answer today, you'll get a personal response from one of us. So if there's a question we just don't get to, we still promise we'll hit that afterwards. The first video that we're going to show you, it's a video that some of you might find very moving, maybe even difficult to watch at times. And with our students or any staff presentation, we always talk about pathways to care, making sure that you are taking care of yourself. Some of this conversation may be difficult for some people to listen to at times. And again, we encourage you to do what you need to take care of yourself the best, because that's always going to be important. Our mental health is paramount in any of these conversations that we have. And this video is just simply asking us to consider what other people are going through at every part of the day, because we don't know that. We don't know what it's like to live in someone else's shoes and how that does impact us, why words do matter. So much from that. We don't meant to use this video. We're not meaning to use this video as kind of a long discussion point, but just a couple of lines Evelyn and I both might refer to. To me, it's always the end there, that line at the end. If you had knowledge of someone else's experiences, what they see, what they feel, what they hear, how would it change how we respond to people? We know that every single person is carrying something with them every day. A friend of mine referred to this as another phrase some of you might have heard about is your invisible backpack. What are you carrying with you? What are you carrying with you each and every day? And again, that doesn't allow us to use hurtful words when we speak to someone else, but it does help us maybe to understand sometimes what someone might be going through. And it's contingent on us to be aware of that, our own lives, what we're carrying with us all the time, and how that impacts us, and maybe the words or the frustration that we might feel. So something we've used in schools with staff as well as with older students, just even around the restorative practice idea, how to truly understand what people are feeling. Evelyn, you want to jump in with that one too?
Yeah, it's so well. I think that it speaks to our fast-paced world, our fast-paced life. Everything is going so fast, and I just know, like, when we go into schools and we're working with teachers, and even at home, we're running around, we're trying to get things done. And one of the things that we're doing with, especially with the work that we're doing with Safe Schools team, the restorative practice, is how do we take a breath? Mm-hmm. How do we stop and take a breath and actually check in with each other, check in and say, hold on a second, before we run off to here, before we run off to there, I'm talking about myself with my own kids, before we're doing this, that, and the other, or in the classroom, before we start the curriculum, before we start the lesson, how are you? And really wait for the answer and really check in with each other. And I think that's a moment of grace. That's a moment of grace when we can just stop and actually look at each other and say, are you okay? I don't need to know the whole story. I don't need to know the whole story, but I just need to, are you okay? And what can I do to help you? And I think that taking those micro moments to really just check in and say, hold on a second, before we do this is more important. Checking in to see how you are. Emotion, are you ready to do whatever it is we need to do? And if you're not, let's deal with that humanity piece. I'm going too much. See the time, Roy, the time. I didn't think I was going to have lots to say. I have so much to say. This is about our humanity, right? It's so needed. It's so needed. Okay, we're going to go on to the next one, shall we?
For sure. Yeah, definitely. One of the things that centers our work is our equity action plan. And that's something I just want to briefly kind of, this is it's on the board website. You could also see a lot of that. I know there's a question that's come in that I'll try and get to. Either someone also asking about the complaints process. A lot of stuff is on our school board website. I don't know if we'll get to kind of show people through everything today, but you can access it, surf away, let us know when you can't find things. Part of the equity action plan, we have our first year report back video that second year report back that talked about how we're trying to achieve some of these strands. 3 braided strands. We say that because they all interconnect. Commitment to Indigenous education, 2-eyed way of seeing, which we've already talked about. Commitment towards understanding that we need to dismantle anti-Black racism. Racism exists in our schools. We're not saying that as a shock value. It's an acknowledgement. It Exists. Black racism exists within our schools and against other groups. And we need to work at dismantling that. And that comes through dialogue. It comes through education. Commitment towards supporting the 2S LGBTQ plus community. It's something, again, as we say, as we go into the month of June, we do talk about that with pride, that it is something that our board of trustees did vote to fly the pride flags, and you'll see those flying in the month of June. But it's more than just flying a flag. It's making sure that we're supporting people, supporting students, supporting staff, both through mental health, through culturally responsive resources. All of these things matter. I often say to both staff and students, I'm not Indigenous, I'm not Black, and I don't represent as part of the 2S LGBTQ plus community. Does this mean suddenly then that I'm not seen by this plan? And of course I am. And everyone is. Anything that improves the conditions of any of these 3 groups, which we found over time have faced significant discrimination and marginalization, anything that improves their conditions is going to improve conditions for all groups. The line I've heard Evelyn say before that I'll speak to right now is the rising tide lifts all boats. We know that. That's the way that we're going to make sure that everyone is supported. There was a pre-question. I just want to briefly, some of them I'll try and weave in as we go through here, where someone had said, look, you're the equity department. You're causing more exclusion rather than inclusion by focusing on certain groups. And no, that's never the intention. The intention is to acknowledge that, yes, we do acknowledge that there are groups that have faced marginalization, and trauma within our communities. And we're specifically talking about those groups. We're making sure that every group feels heard and feels seen. And when they're not, then that's on us. And we need to make sure we do a better job of seeing that happens. Have a look at the Equity Action Plan when you get a chance. It is on our board website, as well as that report back video. Maybe next slide, Evan, will go into. I think that you were going to speak. Yeah.
Is this me or is this you?
Yeah, we can both piggyback off this one.
Yes. So this speaks to our partnership. I want to say this does speak to our partnership with Safe Schools and the work that we've been doing on restorative practices, because we want to be clear, very clear on two things. One, no discriminatory words are acceptable on any TCDSB property. This is a no-go. It is not acceptable. We are saying as well that how we respond is very important. How we respond to incidents has it from a place of compassion, from a place of understanding, from a place of education, and where we are actually in enacting and embedding restorative practices, where we are treating each incident seriously, that there's consequences. Oftentimes restorative practices is thought of as that there aren't any consequences, when in fact there are absolute consequences, and that the person who is inflicting harm comes to a place of, through education, through learning, the actual harm that was caused, and how to repair that harm and move forward so that the harm ends, so that it doesn't happen again. Because oftentimes when we have immediate punitive responses, and it's important to understand immediate punitive, because we also understand that within the restorative practice model, that ultimately there is a place for a punitive response at some point. If the behavior continues to occur, if this is a recurring behavior and the lesson is being learned, then it becomes a conversation, obviously, of a different response. But if it's immediate, then we're not necessarily getting to the heart of the matter, the heart of the issue, the why. Why is this behavior happening, and how can we be supporting both the students who have been harmed, and to give them a voice, and to give them to have them participate in a dialogue, and have the inflictor of the student who's inflicting the harm understanding deeply that this isn't acceptable, not even just for them at school, but for them in life, and that we are putting them on the path to improve their ways and be someone who stands up for and uses words in a positive way. I don't know if I'm making any sense there. Roy.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, I'm going to springboard from that. So, I mean, when you talk about those, how we're trying to give those lessons to our students, we often talk about education is our way forward. And we talk about discriminatory words, again, our school presentations, you'll hear us refer to those a lot, because what we want you to know, parents, educators, whoever you are that are watching tonight, these are messages that we are in the schools trying to land all the time. So today I was in an elementary school, and we talked about our N-word protocol. And the TCDSB has a very clear N-word protocol where it makes clear that the word is not to be used in schools, period, by anyone. And we're saying these are unacceptable words. These are discriminatory words that cause harm to others. We understand the history of where the N-word came from, that it came from a time of slavery. It came from a time where slave owners used the word to control, humiliate, demean, belittle the enslaved people on the plantation. And we say that's enough reason for this word never to be used again within our Catholic setting if we're going to talk about creating safe spaces. And as much as we understand reclamation and that different communities will reclaim words at different times, hip-hop artists reclaiming the N-word in the 80s, it still doesn't make it something that we use within our school setting. And we'll even survey our students. So I did an anonymous survey in the school I was at today. I do this at all the schools I'm at, asking kids how many have heard the N-word at school. Of course, the majority have. But when you ask how many of them are comfortable with hearing the word at school, elementary schools especially, I'm going to say secondary is a bit different, but elementary schools, grades 6 to 8, the vast majority will indicate, no, they're not comfortable with hearing this word said in school, Black and non-Black students. So we make sure kids understand, look, this word causes harm to others, and that's why we're saying it cannot be used at school. And then the place of restorative is when a student uses the word, it's about education. Do you understand why this word is problematic? Do you understand why it can't be used? Similarly, you're going to see a video, I think it's probably our next slide, that talks about the use of the word gay as a slur, because, you know, that's constantly there in schools. And when we tell our students and our staff any word that disparages, that puts down anyone, that speaks to someone with hatred, It's unacceptable. It is not acceptable in Toronto Catholic schools. We have a discriminatory language and stigmatizing language document that's also on our public-facing board website. It just lets the communities know, no, these words aren't okay. Now, as someone watching this, you might say, yeah, but my child came home and heard this word or heard that word. Totally own that. And I'm going to accept and say, yes, these words are used in our school, but in every instance, we make sure our educators understand it's not about turning our head. It's not about allowing something to grow. Because as soon as we turn our heads on any sort of harmful or hurtful language, it grows tenfold. It just does. What we choose to address says as much about our school culture, our personal culture, as what we choose to ignore. Both are equally important, and we need to make sure that we are addressing anytime hurtful language is used through restorative practice. Evelyn and I were talking just before we came on tonight that how important it is to center it as well in the person who's heard this hurtful language. What do they need in order to see things move forward? Restorative practice, parents, that's a significantly longer conversation. I don't know, as we talk now, maybe that's the webinar we'll do next year, because we do want parent communities to understand the approach to restorative. Why? Simplest one I'll say to you is Christ's message, right? There's Jesus dying on the cross, people making fun of him. And what are his words? Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. None of us are Christ-like in that way. We're going to hurt. We're going to feel things. But that restorative way still has its point there. Evelyn, maybe a good time to queue up our next video. And I use the word gay in a derogatory manner, but it's the message we want you to understand from this.
Work.
So, are you going out tonight?
I can't. My parents say I have to be home right after work.
That's so gay.
Totally gay.
Ugh, that is so Emma and Julia.
Why are you saying that's so Emma and Julia?
Well, you know, when something is dumb or stupid, you say that's so Emma and Julia.
Who says that?
Everyone.
Imagine if who you are were used as an insult. When you say that's so gay, do you realize what you
Such a powerful message, and it's one that we make sure our students hear in presentations as well. There was a poster I saw at one of our high schools several years back, Mary Ward Secondary School, and it said up there, you could have said that was so, and list a whole bunch of words. That was so dumb, that was so stupid, that was so inappropriate, that was so whatever the words would be, but you chose to say that's so gay. And when we do that, we're using a word that someone uses as an identifier, and we're turning it into a negative term, which no, it's unacceptable. Evelyn, I don't know if you want to jump in on this one, or I know we're about to go into our case studies that we have as well.
Yeah, so I think it'll come through to the case studies where we're going to talk more about that action. Let me see if I can get this to work for us here. Yeah, we're good.
Work.
Okay, so we've got some scenarios set up for us to discuss. This is the first one. So scenario number one, a child is called gay for wearing a pink shirt. How would we address the situation?
Yeah. And something we see in schools, right? I mean, some of you are familiar with the whole concept, maybe you are or not, of Pink Shirt Day. And Pink Shirt Day came out of, I believe it was an American school where there were two grade 12 students that might have seen a grade 9 student, a male grade 9 student who was made fun of for wearing a pink shirt. And they said, yeah, why is that even remotely a problem there? When we talk about gender expression, we talk about how people, where do we decide? I often talk about this in my presentations, that only girls supposedly are wearing pink, or that only boys are wearing a certain color, or someone who's non-binary has to wear this color. No, there is nothing that kind of equates that. We make sure that we respect each individual and allow them that personal choice as they go forward. So when this comes up in our classes, we make sure they are addressed. And it starts from our youngest age. Look, this one's specifically about wearing a pink shirt. But we know this applies to so many things around gender expression. We have a kindergarten child who chooses to decide that a male identifying child who wants to play with a doll. Well, you can't do that. Well, in the same way that who determined then that the female identifying child cannot be playing with a truck. These are stereotypes. We talk about all the problems that stereotypes cause within our society. I look at my kids as an example sometimes. Growing up, it used to always be my daughter who would sit and watch the hockey games with me, long-suffering Leaf fan. My son would have no interest. Well, the stereotype would say, well, no, it should be your son watching the game with you. Why? He had a different interest. Now he's come to enjoy the pain of watching games with me. Both of my kids were involved in dance. So for my son doing it, well, boys don't dance. Well, from here, I'm going off to our Black Student Association galas happening tonight. There's going to be a lot of boys dancing on the dance floor tonight. I have no doubt about it. But we create these stereotypes sometimes that cause tremendous harm. And so again, how do we address it? We address it by breaking down those stereotypes, by talking about where did this come from? Why is it that this is something that you think? And how does it change if you have, in this instance, someone that identifies as male wearing a pink shirt? Why is this even remotely a problem? And it's almost have someone explain to you, well, why do you think? Well, they just shouldn't, but why? Speak more to it. If we go back in history, those of you who are history majors, you will understand, actually, even within the Indian culture, one of the evening style of wearing within the Indian culture, it's called a lungi, and almost would look like someone's wearing a skirt. A male, my dad, would have almost what would look like a skirt that's being worn. It's a wrap. And we know any number of cultures have different ways of dress, different ways of doing things. Why did we decide that only one way is possible in this instance? Anything to add to that?
No, you brought up the point of the younger children and talking about gender expression in the kindergarten classroom, and that's exactly right. We have the conversations with the children as early as kindergarten around, toys, exactly what toys and what they gravitate towards, and that it's all good, it's all fine, right? Like it's gender expression is something that, you're not going to use that language with them. Of course, you're not going to start using big words with kindergartens. We always talk about using age appropriate language and in terms that they can understand. But we do see them sometimes they might be the ones to point out the differences, because differences get noticed. Being different. And this is why we talk about diversity, because being different is a gift. Being different is amazing. It doesn't mean anything other than that's somebody's choice, and we're going to respect that, and we're going to think that that's totally fine, because that's a choice that they're making right now that you might make tomorrow. It's just the choice in the moment. Whatever color shirt they want to wear, whatever toy they want to play, it's all good. And so that acceptance, creating that acceptance early on, and that space for them to, and then they get it, and then they feel so free. It's actually quite free for them if you actually see the light go off in their faces, and they're just like, oh, I don't got to worry about that. You really don't got to worry about that. It's actually quite lovely.
It's beautiful. Let's go on to our next scenario. I'm going to be timekeeper. I'm looking, we're at
Scenario 2. We're doing good. We're doing okay.
Yep.
All right. Scenario 2, friends. Scenario 2. 2 students in the same class refuse to acknowledge a trans classmate by their preferred name and pronouns. How do we address this situation?
Look, we understand the current political climate that we're in. All of you do. You're living in it. You see what's taking place day to day. This is something that comes up frequently. And we want to be clear about this. That actually, Evelyn, can we go to the next one? Let's refer to the some Ontario Human Rights Code. And I know someone who's watching will enjoy us talking about that. Institute for Catholic Education. Look, they're the group that ends up being very involved in some of the resources. One of you commented on one of the resources in your pre-questions about the Family Life program. And the Institute for Catholic Education helps create that program. So this is a group that is right from the bishops that have a lot to say about what goes on in our schools. And we think it's really pertinent to see what they have to say. While understanding or defining sex and gender as separate and distinct terms is not consistent with the teachings of the Catholic Church, some would say, and does not reflect a Catholic understanding of the human person and nature of human sexuality, some would say. It's a perspective that is recognized in law by the Ontario Human Rights Code, and it should be acknowledged. This is directly from the Institute for Catholic Education saying that, look, some people, some who are Catholic will say, well, no, I don't agree that transgender is something that exists or that is real. And yet they're making it so clear. This is recognized by the Ontario Human Rights Code. And absolutely it should be acknowledged. And we do. So to go to the question, maybe you can drop back, Evelyn, because my failing memory wants to make sure I refer to all parts of the question. But when we refer back to someone, even one before that, Evelyn, just there we go, thanks. So when you have someone that's saying, no, I'm not going to acknowledge someone by their preferred name and pronouns, isn't this so integral? It's the student's preferred name or pronoun. Why would we treat this any differently than someone who almost says, yeah, my nickname, this is the name I kind of go by, and that's how we're going to refer. I often refer to Aileen Santiago, one of our resource teachers, who's not here tonight, but they'll be watching this at some point, I'm sure, telling us what we missed and what we should have included. But Aileen is one of the most compassionate, brilliant educators I've ever met. And Aileen openly identifies as non-binary. And if it helps Aileen for me to refer to them by their pronouns, they, them, why wouldn't I? How is that changing anything for people? We get so caught up sometimes and I'm not going to do that. Why? This is how someone is asking to be referred to. And yeah, we are going to respect that. And they have a right. I don't want to just talk about human rights because someone once said this to me. Isn't it a shame that you have to refer to this only in terms of human rights or law? And in a way, they're right. But different people are going to listen to different facts. If you're going to listen to the idea that the Human Rights Code says this is important, great. If you'd rather listen to the fact that in a Christ-centered environment in our Catholic schools, it's always about accepting and welcoming the person that's in front of us, then great. That's the way you should go. If you're someone that maybe is a non-religious person and you're simply saying, but I'm going to be kind, I'm going to be caring, I'm going to be respectful to each and every individual because I should, great. However it works, the important thing is words do matter. And if someone is saying to me, this is how I would like to be referred to, then yes, we're going to make sure that happens because it's the right thing to do. It's a respectful thing to do. And it might even start by asking those two students, can I ask why this is a concern for you? And that's where education is going to happen sometimes too. A student might say, well, I don't agree with. And that's fine. You don't have to agree with something if you don't want to, but you do have to show respect and care and concern to each and every individual. That's within our classroom community. That's within our school community. That's within our Greater Toronto Catholic community. Evelyn, anything else you want to jump in on that one?
I think you said it beautifully.
Okay, beautiful.
Said it beautifully.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Let's go on then.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Just before we talk about
okay.
Someone had sent me a question. Someone sent me a text saying, yeah, I'd really like to know where the words matter kind of comes from. And look, words matter it's been a phrase that's been used, over time, but we want to give credit to Harmony Movement. Harmony Movement, you can look up. They're an organization that actually has a campaign called Words Matter. And parents, educators, we so encourage you to go take a look at the Harmony Movement website, and you'll see some of the things. We've been in schools using some of the Harmony Movement materials. Some teachers have as well. Some of this, most of the material actually up until now has just been stuff Evelyn and I, we've kind of put together. But some of the next ones I think our next case study and this particular line comes directly from Harmony Movement. So I'll throw it over to Evelyn to kind of speak to this.
Yes. So this is, I'll just read the quote. Ask your child how they felt and what they understood about the words used, fostering an ongoing conversation about respect and empathy and what they need to move forward. I think oftentimes we kind of give the kids the answers before we actually ask them what they think. Like we need to model that dialogue with the children. And so I love that this is encouraging us to do that. Ask the child how they felt. And then, and the trick here is really waiting and giving them time to formulate the answer. We have to wait for the answer, and they might not know right away, because this is another thing that I find oftentimes when we ask the kids, these are hard questions and these are things, but if we actually give them the time and say, it's okay what you say, I'm just here I'm open to hearing, how did that make you feel? How did, on both sides of the conversation, like certainly the students who are experiencing harm, they do experience the harm, and they need to know that people believe them. That's a crucial part. They need to know that when they disclose, when they say someone has said something and it's been painful, when someone has used the N-word, when someone and when they find the courage to come to an adult and disclose that, it is imperative that we believe them. And it's imperative that we take action. We must act on that. We must have a conversation with the student who said the word, with the student, and sit down and say, okay, how are you feeling when you said this? What was going on in your head when you said this? Like, we really need to be engaging with the children in these conversations. And if they don't understand, if they don't, well, I heard somebody else say it, so I thought I could say it. Okay, then we need to sit down and we need to get to a conversation about respect and empathy. And this happens at school, and then when it happens at home, and when we understand from all the adults as a community in the child's life, that we say, we don't use these words, we don't speak this way, because this is demeaning language, and by demeaning others, you're demeaning yourself. We are elevating, we are encouraging them, we are helping them to elevate themselves by using words that empower, that uplift. We're not here to cut each other down. So this is just one piece that came from the Harmony Movement. There's so many, as Roy said, excellent resources. There's parent-facing, things for parents to be using with children. with your children at home to reinforce these conversations that the teachers will be having. And we also have resources that we've been going in, like Roy said, into schools and supporting teachers and having these conversations from K to 12.
And I so like, Evelyn, the idea of centering it in the student, how the student is feeling, because this is where the conversation should begin, should end, how that child is feeling, both the child who used or the student who used the words that are inappropriate, as well as the child that received it. When we talk about microaggressions, and we'll show you a short video at the end from a student-facing video when we wrap up tonight. But it's, again, when students talk about microaggressions, it's the things they're hearing every day, and how they feel is valid. It's something we often say to you, right? We hear the word "ops." Why are you taking it so seriously? It was just a joke. No, it was a joke to you. It's not a joke to the person who's receiving it, maybe, especially when they're receiving the same joke day after day after day. That's what trauma is. That's when people end up having to hear those things. Again, if we're going to talk mental health of our students, of our staff, of our community members, we have to respect the fact that when people hear these harmful, damaging, disparaging words, they do impact you. We talk about internalized racism or internalized way that people feel. It chips away at you, and it's not okay. And that's why it has to be addressed. Our first two scenarios were very much focusing on issues around 2S LGBTQ+. Our next one, we wanted to focus more on something that comes up oftentimes around dress. So I'll let Evelyn kind of read this one out.
Okay, so scenario number 3 is parent to teacher. Your child who wears a do-rag comes home upset after being called a gangster by another student during lunch. Your child reported the incident to their teacher, but the teacher brushed it off, saying, "Kids don't always mean what they say." The lack of action has left your child feeling unsupported and vulnerable at school. You schedule a meeting with the teacher to advocate for your child and to discuss how the school can address the incident and foster a more inclusive and respectful environment.
Yeah.
How do we address this situation?
You got to go back to the previous slide because there's so much there. I want to make sure that we're addressing it. And one of these, I'm going to say it's a partial question someone's asked that again we are going to hopefully, we said by 7:15. So 7:15-ish, we're going to try and make sure we leave time for your questions because 7:25, we're going to wrap up with something else. But someone asked about complaints process. And one thing I really appreciate about this particular scenario is where it talks about, you call the school because you want to have a meeting with the teacher to find out what took place. We always suggest parents that are watching tonight, start with your child's teacher. If something has happened with your child, we know sometimes we're hearing partial stories. Our child might bring us part of the information. The teacher or the school might bring part of the information. The best way is to have that dialogue in person. So having that meeting with the school, it always starts with the classroom teacher. That's kind of your first point of contact. You find that doesn't go well, then it's your child's school principal. I was an elementary school principal for 14 years, and I took pride in the fact that anything that happened in my schools, I wanted parents to reach out to me so that I could help facilitate those conversations. If I end up failing in that matter and I'm not able to help address the concern the way that you were hoping it would, then at that point you go to your school's area superintendent, and that's all on the website. You'll be able to find that as well too. If after talking to your child's area superintendent, you still haven't found that the area it's been resolved properly, you'll see there's a complaints process listed on the board where you'll go to the executive superintendent and you speak to them about things. We also have an HREA, and we'll talk about some of those code protected grounds later as well too, and you can engage them in conversation too. So to come back to the start of this one though, this conversation around do-rags, and let's be clear about this, we made this very clear in our conversations with principals and staff, they are allowed in the school. As a parent, you might decide you don't want your child wearing a do-rag to school. That as a parent is completely your right. But as educators, we understand the Human Rights Code says this is an area that's protected, and we do allow students to wear it if they have come to school wearing that. And so when students end up making languages or phrases such as, well, this person's a gangster or anything else that's kind of disrespectful, no, look, in this instance, we can say this is a fail in terms of the response that was there. Kids don't always mean what they say, and that's how it's dealt with. No one has been heard. No one has been respected. In these instances, we're always going to say this needs to be talked about. We need to put those 3 kids and have that conversation. Your classmate is feeling disrespected and hurt. Do you understand why? No. Okay, well, let's talk about it. Here's why. And when students almost hear from each other that way, oh, I didn't think about that. I'm not saying it's always going to be as simple as, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. No, there still might be pushback there, but then that's where that skilled educator is going to make sure it's known this is not acceptable. You hurt someone in the way that you chose your words to use. And going forward, that can't take place. And then, of course, we talk about what progressive discipline means, how we move forward. This is a one-time thing that happened. It's not going to happen again, but then it does. Well, then we address it in that progressive discipline way. Everything in schools is not about a consequence. I really feel, and Evelyn and I have said this, it starts with education. It starts with repairing harm. It starts with making sure the person who has been impacted is given a chance to be heard, to be understood. And that's how things kind of move forward. Well, I'm going to really pay attention on time. We're at 7:15.
Yeah.
Jump in what you want
Can I
to
just
say.
add one thing to this? I do want to add I just want to add one thing to this. I want to also say that it is about obviously it's about the child who's upset, but it's also about the other children who are listening. Children are listening, and children are watching how the teacher is going to respond. And based on your response, they are not. So even if the child isn't that upset, let's say, even if the child isn't even overly that upset, it still requires a response. It still requires, hold on a second, what did you mean by that? I would often err on the side of caution. I would rather err on the side of caution and I get accused, Miss, you're making too big of a deal of this. I'm like, okay, but let's understand, we don't call each other things. Why are we calling each other things? Why are we? That's not cool. That's not cool in my class. I don't like that language. I don't like I don't like the toxicity that brings into this space. Children are listening. And if I'm going to overreact, I'll overreact in the positive to protect, because they are seeing that next time when it's me, Miss has my back. That's also what is really important, that the other children are listening too. And that we have to remember what kind of environment that creates. And so if we get to decide how that environment looks like and what words are allowed in and what kind of language is not allowed in. Does that make sense?
It's awesome. I really like the fact that you included that, because it's so true. People notice what's addressed and what is not addressed. We talked about at the start. Our school culture grows in ways that sometimes are positive, but when things are left to fester, that impacts everyone. It affects you, the parent who feels the school is not taking care of something. It affects at the school level as well, for other staff, for other students. And that's why we do say words do matter. They do need to be addressed. Share some resources, just show you a resource page. I gave you a promise that tomorrow you'll get one more email from me that kind of has some of these resources included there.
We're going to go to the end?
Yeah, no, that's here. We'll just briefly talk.
This one. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the bite-sized PD, just to just more, any educators that are here tonight, you can access these on our SharePoint site. If you can't find it, connect with Evelyn or myself. We've had a bite-sized PD is simply meant to give staff kind of almost a brief encapsulation of some fairly complex conversations, but it's a starting point. Everything from microaggressions to implicit bias. We had one on stigmatizing language and discriminatory language. We had one on 2S LGBTQ plus inclusion. Our recent one we've done on restorative practice. So all of these are topics that we've tried to cover with staff that have been shared, some at PA days, some just principals might use in their own staff meetings. But staff, you're welcome to look at these anytime you want. And we think they're really beneficial and they start the conversation. Evelyn and I foolishly say, along with Aileen and Michelle, the other two members of our team, that we will come into schools and we'll help facilitate this. We don't know when because the schedules are packed, but we will do our best to come in. Evelyn, I don't know if you want to briefly talk about the monograph series.
Yes, so the monographs they're actually a series of 3. So we wrote a number of years ago. These are specifically for educators, for classroom teachers, in terms of how to become anti-racist and anti-oppressive in our practices. And so the first one really talks about the self and becoming. It's entitled "Becoming Anti-Racist and Anti-Oppressive Educators." And so in this work, centering ourselves and understanding our own positionality in this work. And how we have, based on our lived experiences, like we said at the beginning, we all speak our own truths, but all of our truths are limited because all of our perspectives are just that. It's just our own perspectives. And so how do we create a stance, or we take on a stance that allows us to be open and acknowledging that I don't know the experiences of all of my students. And so it goes through the self, kind of like that self lens of an educator. And then the second one looks at, okay, so now how do I plan in my practice, planning for anti-racist and anti-oppressive instruction? What does it look like when I am planning instruction in the classroom? Because we acknowledge that no decision we make when it comes to instruction and assessment is neutral. We all bring our biases into the work that we do. And so knowing that, how do we make it as unbiased as possible? And the answer is we include the children. We give children, we center the students' lived experiences. And then the third one looks at how we're using culturally responsive resources in an anti-racist and anti-oppressive classroom, because we know that representation matters. We know that when students see themselves mirrored in the resources, in the text that they're reading, and the stories that they're learning in history, when they see themselves, the engagement goes up, the learning improves. And so these are just a series of monographs that we've written and that we also do PD around with educators in the system.
Awesome. Thanks, Evelyn. I want to very quickly refer to one of the articles we're going to share with you. Just serendipity sometimes is a beautiful thing. This just came out this past weekend. It's an article from OECTA, and so educators will know this, but for parents, OECTA is the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association. And so one of its members, Yvonne Runstler, and I forgot Bonnie, I'm sorry, I don't have the other name right in front of me, so I'll try and get back to that. Oh, Belinda. Yvonne Runstler and Belinda Russo, they're staff officers with OECTA, and so they wrote an article just talking about professional misconduct, the rights of equity-deserving students in Catholic schools. We've talked a lot today about student to student, what happens when students are saying harmful words. But look, it'd be duplicitous if we didn't say that sometimes, as parents, you find that it might be your child's teacher or a staff member in the school who is saying something. So this comes directly from the teachers' union. I want to read parts of it to you. First and foremost, the law protects the student's right to an education without discrimination. Teachers have a legal and moral obligation to uphold their students' rights under Part 1 of the Ontario Human Rights Code. And it goes through all the code-protected grounds. The ones we find talked about most in school: race, ethnic origin, disability, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. There are others, but those are the ones we find most. They also refer to the Ontario College of Teachers, who create the ethical standards for the teaching profession. And it said there is no exception regardless of the publicly funded school system. So Catholic school, public school, we're all publicly funded systems. And the quote that they include is, in 2020, the Ontario College of Teachers Act was amended to include hatred under the Professional Misconduct Regulation. And they define hatred as, quote, making remarks or engaging in behaviors that expose any person or class of persons to hatred on the basis of a prohibited ground of discrimination under the Human Rights Code. Last line I want to share with you, they include in there, as teachers, we have been entrusted with the care of students. We have to provide the same care that a parent would. That's tremendously important. And so that's why anytime you find that you don't think that's happening, that again is that process, whether it be through our HREA, whether it be I always want to talk to the school first as a school principal, previous school principal. I always want the chance to take care of the problem at the local school level. That's always the first place. But if you don't find that's happening, there's all sorts of ways to escalate it. And if you feel that from tonight you've gotten to know myself or Evelyn well, reach out to us as well. I will tell you that one of the first things we'll do is we will put it back to the school. I will always reach out to the school superintendent or the principal saying, hey, here's a concern that's come in. What's going on? How can we help support the parent, the student, and what's going on? Evelyn, 7:22. What's next? Questions? We only have one.
Oh, CARES.
CARES, go for it.
CARES. Okay, so we often get this question. Why do we do this? Especially in our Equity Action Plan, where we have clearly stated in the third graded strand, it's to us LGBTQ+ in the curriculum. And so this is our answer, because TCDSB cares. And CARES, as you can see, is an acronym. And it's a great way to remind ourselves and to remind each other that we do this because C, it stands for our Catholic faith. At the core of Catholic faith are the teachings on accompaniment, compassion, and respect for the dignity of each person. It is our Catholic calling. God made each and every one of us in its likeness. And so it's in line with who we are as Catholics. 2, it is alignment with curriculum. Learning about anti-bullying, homophobia, and transphobia, diverse families, and different gender expressions is aligned with the Ontario curriculum. R, it is a matter of human rights. It is every child's right to be free from discrimination and harassment, period. All schools have the legal obligation to recognize and respect a child's sexual orientation, gender expression, and gender identity. E, it's in our Equity Action Plan, as we already explained to you. And S, most importantly, S is student mental health and well-being are of paramount importance. 2S LGBTQ+ students are at higher risk of self-harm, homelessness, and violence. 2S LGBTQ+ students report more harassment in Catholic schools. That alone should be a sobering thought for us. When you see a child, when you see them for who they are and celebrate who they are, that is life-saving. That is life-saving, friends. And so this is why we do this. This is why we do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Evelyn. Thank you for that. Let's go on to the next slides. I want to just briefly refer to this one, and then we'll just finish off with questions and that student video. This is a slide that I just used today, again, in a school presentation for students I was at. And I talked to them about the fact that for me growing up, way back when, the phrase we often heard was sticks and stones can break my bones, but, and I have the students finish it off, words can never hurt me. Well, we hope that message has come across loud and clear tonight, that no, absolutely words can hurt. And we have students finish the phrase in different ways. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words, and we'll hear everything from words can break my heart. Words can destroy me. Words can damage me going forward, because they can. All of those things can. But then we ask them to flip the script and consider that positive side of this, because what else can words can do? And students will tell us, words can heal. Words can restore. Words can affirm. And all of those things matter as well. We live in a society, unfortunately, where oftentimes our words are used for the negative, the joke, right? Everything's about the joke. It's about, I'm going to make fun of someone else. I'm going to get the laugh, whatever it might be. But those words sting and they leave marks. And so we want people to understand something you already know. We realize this, but we hope that we can reinforce it tonight, that when we use our words in every instance, whether it's at home, whether it's in our workplace, whether it's in our schools, when we use our words to affirm and to support and to lift people up, but what a different society we would have. And it's a shame sometimes when someone receives a compliment and it's almost that suspicion of, why did you just say something nice to me? Because you're a child of God and you deserve to hear something special about yourself. Affirmations matter tremendously. And I hope that's something that you will take from today. We got a couple of minutes. The questions on the stream. I've only had that one question that came up so far, and that's fine. Maybe people just listen tonight. Maybe we know some people are going to watch after the fact. Reach out to us if you have things you want to ask. And it was about the complaints process. So hopefully we've covered that enough today. From the initial, I don't know if you have it open, Evelyn. I'm going to open up the initial questions that were there. Look, everyone came into this in different ways. We had everything from questions that spoke about how are you in a Catholic school talking about these sorts of ideas? How are you talking about 2S LGBTQ+? And I often tell people, this is one of the easiest questions I ever get. How can you talk about this in a Catholic school? How can you not? At what point did we forget that Christ's whole message was one of love and inclusion? Many of you will have heard me give this message before. I don't take credit for it. Something I always heard Audrey Fair, one of our religion resource teachers, say. Who did Christ eat with? Zacchaeus, the tax collector, who people said he shouldn't be with. Who did Christ speak to? The woman at the well, who people also said, don't talk to her. Who did Jesus choose not to judge? The woman the Pharisees brought to him to be stoned. And when he said, let he or she who's without sin cast the first stone. And we never want to equate sin with 2S LGBTQ+ inclusion. We do want to so clearly say, yeah, it's a group that is marginalized many times. And the message of Christ, the message of inclusion, is that all are welcome. Those beautiful words from Pope Francis, right? In the church, that rest his soul, in the church, there's room for everyone. So we really want to make sure people understand, yeah, absolutely, we're going to continue having these conversations in a respectful way, because that's what matters most to it. Evelyn, you get to pick one question, then we got to end off with the video. If there's anything you feel we got to address from those lists, we promise to respond to anyone if we don't get to your question tonight. These are the pre-questions that were asked.
I don't have them in front of me. Sorry, Roy.
Okay.
I don't.
Even better, Evelyn. So I'm going to end up saying that.
It's fun video.
Here's one. Here's the
Yeah,
last one.
go. Sure.
Second question: how are you combating hateful agendas that may be introduced at a parent council? Look, again, we have our parent counselors. We have Ryan Peterson's our superintendent of parent engagement. You can reach out to him anytime you feel something in your parent council. I'd always say, again, start with your school principal. But again, we do come out to parent councils. Evelyn's done several parent council presentations. I have as well. Parents need to hear this message. And that's the point of nights like this. Look, whoever's watching tonight, we might have 5 people watching tonight. We might have 17. We might have eventually 50 or 60. We had 76 that signed up. We hope that you're going to still understand that the message that we want to deliver is that yes, words matter and that they impact our students. We're going to end with a student video that just tells you how microaggressions, why words matter. This comes straight from Student Voice.
do things or say things without acknowledging how it could make another person feel.
I've often heard people tell me like I'm really smart for a Black girl.
We can set up boundaries, point it out when it's said, and be more open about it.
Be more aware of what you say, think before you speak, and just educate yourself.
We could educate others about how they ask certain questions, and we could tell them how we feel. If we felt like somebody said something hurtful to us, then we could tell them like that was hurtful. Sometimes people don't know that they're necessarily saying something that is a microaggression.
We just tell them like if they want to touch our hair or something, let them ask first, or if we don't feel comfortable, we just say don't touch. We don't feel comfortable with touching them.
You educate people on what's right and what's wrong and make sure it doesn't happen again.
I think that we should all just like be kind to each other and stuff, because even though we have different like skin colors, we still are like the same.
Last words from both Evelyn and I. So I want to just go with those student words from Marcia McLuhan. Be mindful of your words and the weight that they carry. That's a message for all of us. Evelyn, last word to you.
The three things that one of the students said: awareness, be aware, think before you speak, educate yourself.
Yeah.
It's so simple.
Yeah.
And
And
so true.
Yeah, we thank you for coming tonight. We thank you for choosing to do those things. And again, whether you watch live, we know what we ask you to do is if there's anything that you found was worthwhile, was beneficial from this conversation tonight, forward this link on. This is going to stay. This will be on our public-facing website. We want people to keep hearing this message. And we thank you for finding the time to hear from Evelyn and I tonight.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Have a good
Enjoy
night.
your evening.
Ending stream.